So it's a pretty involved scaling system. And they have customer expectations on to the side. So when they're building a car, they know exactly what the customers are expecting. And the more they meet or exceed the customer expectations, the heavier the demand is for the car. And each of the expectations are percentiles. So for an economy car, the miles per gallon would be much more of an influence in purchase than, say, the luxury features. And the dynamics shift between cars. Then they go to a marketing page, a marketing department, where they have to develop a marketing mix between TV, radio, web, newspapers, and some other media. They have to pick a target demographic and income, develop an advertising slogan, a strategy. It's sort of one student.
Is this a web-based system?
It's 100% web-based.
Okay. So they can do this outside of class.
Right.
And home
There's no
and
software. They connect to a website and do all the work on the website. And it's students are. We live in a different age today. Students are much different when I went to school, or even when I first started teaching, because now we're so immersed in the digital media between the PDAs and the laptops, and students are multitasking. They're used to this world where, from the video games, how they developed into networking. Now the video games, they play against each other or play with each other in teams. So they're very familiar, very comfortable with this world. So it's a great learning tool to move them into something that will hold their attention, because their attention spans are fragmented from the multitasking. In the classroom, students are multitasking. They're sending text messages. They're on their laptops. They're listening to the lecture.
Do you encourage that, or does that bother you?
It doesn't bother me. It's a fact of reality today, and that we do encourage students to bring their laptops to class because it is more beneficial, I think, than harmful. But you can't stop the progress of this digital world in media. I mean, students are, as long as they're not being disruptive into the class, they're going to do these activities. So adding a component like the simulation, those other activities instantly stop because they're so focused on the simulation.
Now, is it good enough that they sort of really get the sense like they're running a real company?
It's the closest thing to running a company, I found, because they're learning by doing. And the class that, when I'm running in class, I actually play with them. And it's embarrassing because some of the students do beat me. But I do put my money where my mouth is. I will run the company. Mine is more transparent. So I go over, I do it in front of them, and I show them what I'm doing. And I'm surprised when they do beat me, because I could have a class where, it's great if I have a large class setting, like to 100 students or more, because 1 to 100 is a difficult number. But if I put them in teams of 5, it's almost like 1 to 20, because I will meet with them. I'll give them time to work on the simulation in class, and I'll meet with the group and give them some feedback. So it gives me a chance to be a little bit more intimate with the students in a large class setting, because it's 1 to a group. So I can get almost around to everybody and see what they're doing, and they like the strategy of it. It's sort of like a game of chess where, for me, it only takes 20 minutes to explain how to play it to the students, and they pick it up quickly. But the levels of complexity of strategy in the game are pretty high. And the things that they've been coming up with and employing, I see mimic the business world very closely. And from being in business myself for over 10 years, working for various companies in different roles, it is very close to running a company, making the major decisions. And it is, it's very cool for the students to see that their decisions are affecting how other teams are doing, seeing their results looked at they have a nice series of charts and graphs, an analyst overview, to see, what an analyst would say about their company, how they're running it, and what the feedback would be, and how the year-over-year results equal their points that they accumulate in the game. And then they're curious about how I'm doing things and why I'm doing that. And we have it opens up a lot of discussions about, would a real company do that, and what would be the consequences? And some students come up with questions. They say, this is unrealistic. The company is making more profits but making worse cars. And I said, well, that does happen. Companies are always striving to reduce the costs. So if you reduce the costs, and sometimes you don't
until they get sued by somebody.
Well, you don't want to make a car that the gas pedal sticks, of course. But sometimes consumers don't need as much as their expectations. And as long as you're meeting their expectations, you don't necessarily have to exceed them in every area. So it's more of a management of your resources and a strategy.
So Mike, if a new faculty were to come to you and say, I'm starting out teaching and I'd like to use perhaps problem-based learning, what would your advice to that person be?
That's a really good question. I do hire faculty to work in the department, and we'll go over best practices in the classroom, and that question comes up quite frequently, and there is a learning curve to getting it right, and there is a lot of additional investment that you have to put into the class to get the right cases and the right work, and get that problem-based learning to really fit the construct of the class that you're teaching.
Right.
And it's frustrating because there's a lot of extra work for the faculty to grade these types of cases and work with the students, but it's much more rewarding once the work is done and the students feel like, there's nothing better than the student feeling like, coming up to you and saying, I really got a lot out of that class. I really learned a lot. I think it's going to, and I quite frequently have students who come back to me after they graduated and said, the reason I got this job was because, of those cases in your class, or I, solved a number of problems at this company based on some of the casework that you've had. I actually used your spreadsheet. And, I do demand a royalty for that, but I never get one.
Right. But again, what do you tell the new faculty member?
Well, I tell them, first I freely give them my materials. And I say, look at what I'm doing. And I ask them to come by my class and experience, some of the work I do with my students. And I say, draw from your background, what are you strong, what areas are you strong in, or you have a good amount of experience, and start from there. So you have a basic confidence
it's like writing a book. Always write your first book about what you know.
What you know. We try to target our faculty closely to their experiences to the course they're teaching. So students get the best of their experiences, and then I help shape them to be a good instructor based on saying, here's some expectations or what students are looking for today. And the problem is a lot of instructors remember what college is like when they went to school. And they want to duplicate that. Right. And I have to break them away from that.
Teach as they were taught.
Right. And so a lot of times the best way is kind of, have them experience my class as a student for a night and have them actually do some of the work.
Okay. So rather than tell them, show them.
Exactly. Because I find that lecturing and telling is one way of learning, but the most effective way of definitely learning by doing. And that's my motto for most of my classes, where, and sometimes the technology doesn't have to be as involved. A lot of times a simple in-class assignment where I have just a photocopy I bring in and have them do the work. I explain it, demonstrate it, and have them do it.
Okay, Mike. Well, thank you very much for being on the show today.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you.
If you have any questions for Mike, you can post them on the blog on the TLT website at tit.stonybrook.edu, where we'll also post direct contact information. I'm Graham Glynn. I'm glad you could join me for this exciting innovations in education episode.